Welcome to Breaking Through with me, Kristen Rao Finkbeiner, powered by Moms Rising. I'm so glad you're joining us because talking about power is what we're doing today. We start out with the National Women's Law Center, and we cover the many powerful ways that you can help save democracy, and there are many, so that's a good thing. Following that segment, we dive into the latest inside scoop on what is happening with the Republicans messing around with our national budget as they try to pull money out by cutting programs like Medicaid to give billionaires tax breaks. It's not good, but you can make a difference there too. Hot tip, call your U.S. Senator. That segment is followed by another segment on childcare and why childcare for all is more important than ever. And we close the show talking about immigrant rights. We're going to jump right in with our first guest. Thanks so much. Welcome to Breaking Through with me, Kristen Rao Finkbeiner, powered by Moms Rising. We are joined by a spectacular expert guest, Peggy Bailey, who is with the Center on Budget and Policy Priorities. And we are so excited to have Peggy with us today. Welcome, Peggy.
Hi, thanks, Kristen, for having me here.
I'm so excited that you're here. The Center on Budget and Policy Priorities is just such a spectacular organization and does such a good job explaining what's happening with our nation's budget. People have likely been looking at the headlines and going, oh no, what is happening? Seeing big cuts to Medicaid, for example, proposed by Republican leadership. What is happening in our national budget right now?
Well, thanks for asking. I feel like I should make a t-shirt out of that because that's going to be a theme for the whole year. What is happening? So, what's most recently happening is the House has gone through a chaotic process of creating a budget reconciliation bill. That bill cuts Medicaid, it cuts food assistance, it fails to extend the child tax credit to about 17 million kids, and it does all of that in service of giving tax cuts to wealthy people and wealthy corporations. So it clearly outlines the priorities of the House of Representatives and many of the Republicans in Congress, and it will harm so many people. And like I said, all for the purpose of giving tax cuts to wealthy people.
And it is one of the most ridiculous, economically harmful, cost of living increase, damaging to our health bills I personally have ever seen. And I've been working in politics for maybe 923,000 years. It feels that way. It feels like it might have been 923,000 years since January 1 of this year, in fact. But, and this bill, though, it does a couple things. And you were talking about it in terms of showing the nation who Republican leadership is and what they stand for. And what they stand for, as you just said, is increased tax breaks for people who are very wealthy, like Donald Trump's billionaire friends, like Elon Musk, that will be paid for by cuts to things like Medicaid, which more than 72 million people rely on Medicaid for their health care. More than 40% of births, more than 60% of nursing home stays, 1 in 3 people with disabilities. I mean, the economic hit from pulling out healthcare from tens of millions of people is so big. It's so big. It's fiscally unresponsible. And also, what a lot of people don't realize is Medicaid keeps the doors of rural hospitals and hospitals of all sizes open for anyone who's having a health emergency. So, would you say, from your perspective, that this economic budget package, the bad budget package, is harmful to our economy as a whole?
Absolutely. And it's not only harmful to the economy as a whole because it's going to increase the federal debt, again, only in service of trying to give the most wealthy people a tax break, but it's going to hurt people at their kitchen tables. You take the SNAP benefits, for example. So, SNAP, food stamps, those are being proposed to be cut. Uh, One of the ways that they're going to cut those benefits is by requiring families to prove that they're working if they have kids over 7. So kids under 7 must be fine, but kids over 7, it's okay to threaten their ability to eat. That's completely unfair. It's unfair to the moms and dads that are trying to just raise their families, work every day, and expect the federal government to be able to help them out. But instead, this bill is going to create barriers. We know that when when programs require work, it's not about requiring work. Most people who can work do work when they're getting federal assistance. It's about helping their families be able to close that income gap between what their bosses pay them and the ability to actually afford basic needs. And adding these work requirements really just creates another barrier because now it's another piece of paper, another log onto the computer to try to prove benefits, another challenge if you did that wrong. Now you've got to go and figure out how to do that paperwork correctly. It's all about creating barriers and making it harder for families when we really should be making it easier for families. So it's not only going to harm the economy, increase the debt, it's going to harm families where they live. And that is just completely unexplainable. I just don't understand when they've made promises to making things better for families when they're so obviously actually making it worse.
You raise an important point. On the campaign trail, Donald Trump said and promised, I will lower costs for families. The exact opposite is happening, people. Costs for families are going up. And at the same time as costs for families are going up, in part due to Trump's terrible tariffs tantrum, we are experiencing the programs that allow people to go to work, that allow people to raise their kids and thrive, and allow people to contribute to their communities, like SNAP and Medicaid. We're seeing Republicans cut those out entirely. So we have two things happening that are really disastrous. Costs are rising because of Trump's policies, and also the programs that allow people to build good lives are being cut by Donald Trump and Republicans. So it's a double whammy of doom. Now, I want to go back into SNAP because I think this is really important. There's a whole bunch of really important things to unpack. First of all, SNAP. Sometimes people are like, oh, it's a handout. Not really a handout. Not at all, actually. And in fact, SNAP is a huge economic booster to our economy. For every $1 in that we put in for SNAP, we get back $1.79 later because that money is immediately spent in our economy, and our economy is fueled by consumer spending right now. And whereas if you give a billionaire a tax break, that money usually, according to studies, does not go back into the economy to fuel it. It gets locked up in some savings account someplace out of the economy, so it does not become an engine for our economic success. So we have like this really interesting side-by-side comparison of which policies actually boost our economy and which don't. And again, listeners, billionaires getting tax breaks sucks the fuel out of our economy, whereas programs like SNAP and Medicaid and the CTC and childcare, those programs are proven to boost our economy and to allow people to go to work, to take care of their kids, and to contribute to their communities. And yet we also have this really weird word coding coming out of the Republican leadership about work criteria. And I'm glad you mentioned that, Peggy, because this is really important to listeners too. Some states have tried work requirements, like quote work requirements, and it ended up costing more to the states and more in the programs and more to taxpayers because it turns out, as Peggy said, there is not a lot of people trying to game the system. Most people are already working, right? And also, if you are unable to work, there's usually a reason. And so when we're talking about work, 3 out of 4 families need the wages of moms to make ends meet, and the majority of moms are in the labor force. So what is this work requirement weird coding coming from, or where is it coming from? What's happening with that?
Well, it's coming from a place of trying to put people in categories of who deserves help and who doesn't deserve help. And this is a false equivalency to make. Everyone needs to be able to eat. Everyone deserves the ability to access health coverage. And that is something that the wealthiest country in the world should be able to provide for the people who are here. One of the one of the ways that we can see how they're using this false narrative is they're doing a lot to demonize people who are immigrating to this country. And they're trying to wrap up that around people who are documented and undocumented. But in this bill that's passed the House, it's only documented people who are eligible for programs, people who are documented in some way, who we know are here, that are eligible for these programs. Yet they're cutting the benefit access to those very families, and cloaking it in the veil of trying to demonize them as other when they are a part of who we are as the United States. It's what makes us stronger, is the fact that we are so diverse and that we invite people into this country to help make us stronger. But this bill that is another way that this bill is otherizing people and demonizing people and trying to say that one person is more deserving of food than another person. And that's where the work requirements piece is also coming from. It's trying to say, and that and it's just unacceptable. It's not the case. All they're doing instead is making it harder for people who are working the hardest to be able to get the help that they need.
100%. And I'm glad you raised what's happening with immigration. In this bill, also, we see a tremendous amount of money going toward mass human rights abuses without due process. And they're wanting to pay for, by they, I mean Donald Trump and Republican leadership. I want to name names here. They want to pay for that through cutting Medicaid, SNAP, childcare, and more. That just hurts us all. It hurts our economy. It hurts our families. It hurts our communities. It hurts our hearts. I mean, it is really a ridiculously very bad, awful bill. And now it's moving to the US Senate. So the House has shown us who they are. You know, there's that old quote from Maya Angelou: when someone shows you who they are, believe them. Okay? People, the US House has shown us who they are. They are wanting to give tax breaks and lots of our tax dollars, frankly, to billionaires who are already very wealthy. And they're wanting to pay for those tax breaks to billionaires with cuts to the programs that altogether we have all said as voters that we think are important. They're tools for success. Medicaid, SNAP, Head Start, the CTC, and more. And so now it moves to the Senate. And what do you think is going to happen in the Senate?
Well, I wish I had a crystal ball so that I could that I would know, or that I had superpowers so I could make the Senate just kill this bill. But sadly, I have neither. So this is the best guess of how things are going to go. The thing that we do know is that there are some pieces of this bill that will naturally fall away in the Senate. And that's because this is a budget reconciliation bill. It is a budget reconciliation bill because those are the bills that only require 50 votes in the Senate. They only require 50 votes in the Senate because they only address spending issues. There are rules we call Byrd rules. They're named after Senator Byrd, who long ago set up the framework for how budget reconciliation bills can move through the Senate. And what that means is, since they can only be spending issues, that means some of the policy pieces, things that just change how programs work but don't impact the cost very much, can't be part of the bill. So the Senate parliamentarian is who decides what is germane to the bill and what has to go, and it's going to go through that process. We call that the bird bath because the bird rules. Bird bath is cute. And it's washing away some of the provisions of the bill. But sadly, the things that we care about the most are the cuts. And so those are spending related. They're going to cut Medicaid, cut food stamps. Those things are largely going to will stay in past those rules. So the next piece then is looking at what the senators are saying and holding them accountable if they say they don't want to cut food assistance, if they don't want to cut Medicaid, if they want to give families more cash through the child tax credit, if they care about families being stronger, we need to hold them accountable to that. We also need to explain to senators the harm that it's going to cause to families. That example that I gave of the mom with the 8-year-old who now is going to have to go through extra steps to prove that she deserves to be able to feed her child. Being able to put it in those human terms is really important. The Senate has said that they want to try to pass a bill by July 4th. It is going to be hard for them to meet those deadlines, but they do have a time constraint. And that's because they've attached the debt limit to this process. The debt limit is what you hear about every so often, where Congress has to give the federal government permission to pay our debts. Well, we're reaching up to one of those limits where now Congress is going to need to approve to raise the debt limit so that the US can continue to pay its debts. When you hear about that, you hear about all the catastrophe that could happen if Congress doesn't pass that. So it's a natural forcing mechanism since they've attached this to the budget reconciliation to make them keep up this chaotic pace, this passing bills in the dark of night pace, unfortunately, may continue as the bill moves to the Senate. But our job is to put it into the light of day, to show in the light of day the horribleness that is included in these bills, the harm that it would cause to families, and therefore the harm that it will cause to the United States as a whole.
Thank you so much for being on, Peggy. Thank you for all you do. Thank you also, Center on Budget and Policy Priorities. Everybody, follow the Center on Budget and Policy Priorities. Support the Center on Budget and Policy Priorities, and make those calls to your U.S. Senator and say, vote no on the big, bad, terrible budget. Thank you.
Thanks, Kristen.
We're going to take a quick break, but stick around. We'll be right back with our next guest talking about the national budget. It's an important topic, and you're going to love this segment. We'll be back in a quick flash. Welcome back to Breaking Through with me, Kristen Rao Finkbeiner, powered by Moms Rising. We have with us today a nation-lifting, country-shaping superhero, Fatima Goss of the National Women's Law Center. Welcome, Fatima.
Hi, Kristen. I'm so happy to be with you.
I'm so excited that you're here. So we've had many adventures this week. We're going to talk about the importance of law in the legal system, but I also want to talk about the importance of speaking up and continuing the fight. So just in the past week alone, there have been a lot of moments where we have had to speak up. By we, I mean the royal we, the United States of America. And what are your first thoughts on both the reason why we need to speak up and if it makes a difference?
Well, throughout our history, speaking up makes a difference. So it may not feel like that in real time. In fact, in this time, many people are feeling very isolated. And so the other thing I would say is speaking up together makes an even bigger difference. So if you feel like you're going it alone, you can bring people with you. And like it was wonderful to be with Kristen and my other Care Can't Wait crew outside the Capitol speaking up together. And again, that has been my mantra that we have to get used to and get comfortable with being defiant, being in a dissent posture when we see something that we know is not okay and will not serve people well.
Yes, and speaking up is a key tool to saving our democracy because we need to keep speaking up, keep saying, hey, like if you cut Medicaid for 80 million people, that is a big problem, right? So the other tools that we have, and I wanted to have you reflect on them as well, are also legal tools. And legal tools are also important. And so, can you just share with our listeners a little bit why, in this moment, this ridiculously weird moment in our nation's history, and as democracy is frankly in flux, why are the courts and the legal system also, in addition to speaking up, so critical and fighting back against the Trump administration and the damage they're causing?
Well, in so many ways, the rule of law and our legal system are foundational to our democracy. And so I actually have been trying to go back to first principles around this, that why do we have a rule of law? Why do we have something consistent that is serves as a boundary and an understanding that no matter who you are, the same set of rules should apply to you? That is what the rule of law is. Because if you don't have that, and it is true in lots of places around the world where that is not a foundational idea, what replaces it is brute force and violence. So, brute force and violence and dominance, instead of a set of clear and consistently applied rules, that notion is a threat not just to our democracy, but it gets foundationally at who gets to be equal in this country, who's considered important in this country, whose lives matter and whose don't.
And can you share a little bit of examples of that in practice? Like, what kind of legal suits
Right.
has the National Women's Law Center been really making sure happen? And how
Yeah.
has the National Women's Law Center been protecting our civil rights and our democracy at the same time?
Yeah, I'm so glad you asked that because so there have been dozens upon dozens of lawsuits filed in the last about 120 days. So that record is historic, but what also has been historic has been the success rate, right? Time and again, our courts have been functioning as they should and upholding the rule of law. They have been saying this thing that you have done is illegal and you must stop doing it. So the National Women's Law Center has been really proud to be a part of that. We filed a lawsuit together with our co-counsel at the Lawyers Committee for Civil Rights, challenging the diversity executive order, which was one of many executive orders that was boogeymanning diversity and equity to tear down vital programs in this country that have been serving families and women and people. So we have filed a lawsuit there. We have been trying to intervene to protect Title IX, the law that bans sex discrimination in education. And we have more litigation to come. We have been filing FOIA requests to get information and about some of the illegal conduct that we've seen agencies undertake, like the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, the EEOC, whose job it is to ensure that all of our civil rights are protected at work. Well, they are saying they're going to do the opposite, and they're not allowed to just ignore laws that have been on the books for 50, 60 years that are the real guide in this moment. So the last thing I'll say is the big thing we have been trying to help hold on to is that we have lots of institutions and laws in this country. Those should not be changed just because there is a new president, no matter how scary executive orders, no matter how much he shouts from social media, on Truth Social, no matter what level of brute force. Our job right now is to reground everyone and remind them that as you take little acts of courage, there is a boundary of protection in our law and in our institutions that can withstand this time.
And legally, people often need to be reminded that there is a separation between the executive branch, Congress, the legislative branch, and the judiciary branch. And can you just share a little bit about that? Because we have a president right now who I like to call the malignant Cheeto, who is trying to say, oh, I get to control all of those branches. The answer is no. But can you share a little bit of the background legally on that?
Right. That's why I have never taken it as a joke when he's suggested that he wants to be a king or a dictator, because those are inconsistent with our democracy. Our Constitution provides for three equal branches, right? There's the executive, and the president is at the top of that. There is Congress, and they have equal weight as the president, and is the judiciary, and they also have equal weight. And I will say, Congress of those three has been the one that has been the biggest surprise in this period. They have forgotten the force of their authority. They have forgotten that it is their job to provide oversight. It is their job to actually be the ones that decides how the government is going to be funded. It is their job to actually vet and confirm nominations that come from the executive. They have a whole bunch of responsibility and authority given to them by the Constitution that they're running away from. And the people who hold Congress to account are the people, right? They are the constituents. So in many ways, Congress is probably the most powerful of the three because of that, because the people have the closest contact to them. And so all of these branches of government were designed to keep each other in check so that no one became too powerful. And then there's a fourth branch that I'd say maybe you're participating in right now, Kristen, and that is the press, right? The freedom of the press, it's why it's a part of our First Amendment. They are the unofficial branch of government that helps ensure that these other ones don't operate in the cover of darkness in ways that are disaster for the people in this country.
I 100%, of course, agree with you. And I thank you for explaining that, because I love your framing of Congress has forgotten their power and that the people have the power to remind Congress where they actually should be standing. So first, to listeners, I want to let you know that right now we have Republican leadership in the House, Republican leadership in the Senate, and obviously Donald Trump is a Republican. So it is specifically Republican leadership who are just kind of doing whatever Donald Trump says, which is ridiculous, awful, and bad, and not taking the mantle of responsibility for our country, for the patriotism, for making sure that our country stands for us. And so that means that we have to stand up. And I know the National Women's Law Center engages across a wide variety of tactics. By the way, thank you, National Women's Law Center. Thank you, Fatima. Thank you for saving our democracy. Thank you for saving our rights. What are some other tactics, given the bizarre context that we're in right now, that is not, frankly, normal in history, that National Women's Law Center is utilizing to help protect our rights and, honestly, save democracy?
Listen, this is a time for all of us to do what we have typically done and then to do some things that maybe make us a little bit uncomfortable. And that's how we're thinking about it. We're taking on litigation that isn't even in the lane that we have historically done. We aren't the people who would have, sought to protect grant funding or tried to figure out how a whole agency doesn't fall apart. But now those are the types of things that we are thinking about. We're thinking about how we talk to people and bring them with us in different ways. That our team has been out there with a campaign that's really getting straight to the point to help people understand that honestly, billionaires are robbing us right now. That is what's happening. We haven't put it in as pretty language. We figured we might as well get to the point. And so you may see posters out there and stuff on the internet that makes that point. But we always are also foundationally back to our roots. At this organization, one of our superpowers is that we have facts, we have law, and we have a lot of experts that can bring them to bear. So our team is working around the clock to make sure that people understand what is in that big ugly bill, what is at stake for them, so that people understand what is it that DOJ has been doing and how does that impact women around this country, and so that people understand every time they try to scapegoat, whether it is trans folks or diversity and equity policies or immigrants, they have a real agenda in mind. And we're trying to help you not get distracted from it. And instead, here is the invitation to join with us in this fight. We want it to be all of us working together because we think there is a quiet majority that is ready for action and everyone needs to get in motion.
I, again, 100,000% agree. How can people get involved with the National Women's Law Center? I want to make sure everybody gets involved, stays involved, follows, does what you tell them to do, because we really need a moment, as you said, for us all to come together. What can people do?
Well, the first way is to go to our website, which is old school, but if you do, you can easily sign up on our list and become a part of our community that way. That's nwlc.org. And that website will give you a wide range of ways to get involved and ways for you to take action with us. But I also hope you will follow us on social, that you'll follow us on Instagram and Facebook and Blue Sky and X. And TikTok, we're in all of the places. I'm in a few of those places. I'm not in as many of them individually. You're welcome to follow me. But really, the National Women's Law Center, you can follow them on every one of those social channels too. And that'll tell you when and how to engage with us.
And speaking of engagement, we have 1 minute left. What should everybody be doing this week, next week, and the week after?
This week, next week, and the week after is 100% about this big, ugly, hairy bill that is now going from the House to the Senate. It is not too late to get engaged. It is not too late to make your voice heard. It's not too late to tell your story. It's not too late to bring all of your sisters with you to say we deserve better in our community. We deserve for our children to have what they need. We deserve to have health care. We deserve to ensure that no one goes hungry, and we're going to fight for it. That's what people need to hear this week, next week, and the week after. And I hope you will join us in doing that.
So call your US senators. You have two of them and say vote no on the terrible, awful, very bad bill. They'll know what you're talking about. You don't even need to know a bill name. Everybody knows it's a bad bill, even Republicans who are proposing it. So just tell your senators, vote no on the bad budget bill. And, call them maybe once a week, maybe twice a week, even calling 3 times a week would be helpful. Thank you so much for being on with us. Fatima Goss, National Women's Law Center. Thank you.
Thanks so much.
We're going to take a tiny break, but next up is about childcare and why everyone needs it. We're going to be back in just a moment. Welcome to Breaking Through with me, Kristen Raufinkbeiner, powered by Moms Rising. We are joined by a fabulous guest who has come to us today, Viviana Westbrook. She is with the Catholic Legal Immigration Network, also known as Clinic. Welcome, Viviana.
Thank you so much.
I'm so glad that you're here today. I want to know, what is Clinic? Can you give our viewers and our listeners a little bit of background?
Sure. So Clinic, basically, we are the people who train the other folks who are out there doing the work, who are, filing petitions for immigrants. There's a lot of nonprofits out there that, are seeking immigration relief, that are conducting a lot of interviews with folks to see if they qualify for anything. And then they have to file a ton of petitions, and immigration law is so complex and constantly evolving. So what we do is that basically we provide the service to our affiliates, that we just train them on any of these filings they need to do. And yeah, we have loads of trainings. And then we also have an advocacy section, which is where I come in because I'm the state and local advocacy attorney there. And my role is a little bit different from the training section, which, for me, I can do any state and local advocacy as long as it impacts immigrants. It does have to come from an affiliate or from the Catholic conference directors across the various states. But, we get involved. We try to get some good things passed on the ground and try to fight the things that, are anti-immigrant.
I mean, right now we have a disastrous situation where Donald Trump and Republicans in Congress are really scapegoating immigrant families. And a time when, if you look at what's happening in our economy and our families and our communities, we have never needed one another more. If you look at the care workforce, 40% of the care workforce are immigrant people. If you look at the workforce as a whole, who's starting new businesses, who's starting big businesses, who's starting to fuel the economy, all over, it's immigrants. And, also people are not only about the economy. We have many immigrants who are in our hearts and our families. And unfortunately, we have a president who is really trying to do mass human rights abuses in the name of immigration enforcement without due process. And I think that's really important when we're talking in a legal context. All of a sudden, I think this is pretty unprecedented. We have a president who's trying to throw due process out the window. Can you share with our listeners what that looks like and what that means from a legal perspective a little bit, or even an advocacy perspective?
Well, so one of the things I've been doing since the beginning of this administration is I have been doing tons of Know Your Rights presentations, but I have to change them every time. I have to update them every time I go to give a different presentation, and I give several a week, and everything's so evolving. And the fact is that then I tell people what their rights are, but then I also have to give a disclaimer about, and yet some of these rights aren't currently being observed, which is really hard to do. It's unfortunate because you'd like to think that you can tell people what their rights are and then those rights will be, respected. But, we talk about, at the start of the administration, one of the things that happened was that the protected areas memo was rescinded. And this was something that had designated certain spaces as being protected from enforcement, like immigration enforcement, that there were only certain situations where, exceptions would be made. Like if somebody was, they were in the middle of a chase, right? Exceptions would be made for that. But the administration did away with it. And their messaging around it was that they were specifically going after it because they didn't want people to hide out, even though I just said, that was already an exception built into the system. So it just makes me, it begs the question, like, why did you do away with this? Like these were spaces that we wanted to see protected. These were schools, these were, hospitals, of course, churches, places of worship. so important. Domestic violence shelters, food pantries, emergency, places where, sometimes parents, like in Uvalde when there was the shooting, it was CBP that was first on site. And imagine if you couldn't even see if your child was safe because you'd be worried about, being arrested there. Like that's terrible. You don't want to be detained just for checking on your child, and you shouldn't have to make that choice. But that's something that we've been seeing. So one of the things that even though they did away with this memo, we've been telling people, look, you still have rights. Like obviously we can't tell you the same things we would have told you with the protected areas memo, but you should know, that the Constitution still, protects you. Like if we look at the Fourth Amendment, you're being protected against searches, seizures. There is already a right to privacy, that the courts have already found. And so this becomes a question about what we are designating as private versus public. And public spaces, these are going to be accessible to anyone, and that's going to include ICE. But private spaces, you still have the right to say, no, not without a search warrant. You need to have a search warrant, or an arrest warrant signed by a judicial, either magistrate or a judge. Like you need to have that. And if you don't have that, you need to leave because you don't have the right, to be here. And we're not going to turn over someone who's, in our facility. So, we've really been trying to encourage people to get good policies around that, train people up so they understand where, like what's private, what's not, so they know where the risks are, where they're, if it's a patient or a client or, a student, like to know how to protect them, but to make sure that they're doing it all in line with the law and that they're still being there for those folks.
It's so important to know that there are so many rights, which we all have, which are being literally trampled by the Trump administration. And that is not okay. It is not okay to trample people's rights. And just to give our listeners and our viewers a little bit of context, we have a broken immigration system in the United States of America. There is no line to stand in to get immigrant status, and so what we need ultimately is a safe, orderly, and compassionate immigration system and process. And we would like our elected leaders to be working on that, not on doing things that really are illegal. We've got ICE really trampling on the rights of immigrant families right now. So what does Clinic offer? Like what kind of, if people were wanting to get services from Clinic, what are the services?
Well, again, if for people who work for nonprofits who are doing immigration law, we of course, you could become an affiliate, and we really do offer a ton of great benefits. Like we have our federal advocacy team. There's me for, state and local, and with my state and local affiliates, like been doing so much training. Any outreach they want to do, anything like, oh, I want to know how to write an op-ed. I want to know how to engage with my representatives. Now, this is state and local. We don't do legislation at the federal level, but for state and local, it's so important. And right now more than ever, because what's happening at the states just, it never mattered more. And, like just this year, we passed this Maryland Sensitive Locations Act, and it was just signed into law this week. And these things are ways to put different protections in and to kind of try to, protect the same groups that were protected previously under the protected areas policy. And, there's a lot of different ways to do this. There's a way to push back against like 287G. And, one of the things that I do a lot of, like I do a ton of education. I put together resources like toolkits and one-pagers. But sometimes, I need people to reach out to me and tell me, hey, we need this. Like, this is where we have a lot of great materials, but the community really needs this, and I won't know unless they tell me. So.
Yeah, for sure. Where can people find those toolkits and one-pagers? But we have a lot of people like, hey, I want to see those.
Oh, sure. So if they go to our site and they go to cliniclegal.org, you can go just click under our resources. You'll kind of eventually get there. And under resources, you'll see a Know Your Rights section and a Protecting Your Community section. And basically, if you click there, we have tons of resources. We have these one-pagers on knowing your rights in all the different locations, like in your workplace, on the street, at the border, airport. Like, what does this look like, and how is it different? In court. All really important information. And then we also have things like how to protect yourself from notarios, scams, how to just find a lawyer, and at least do like a simple background check, like to make sure that there aren't any really big red flags on them, like they haven't been disbarred or anything like that. And we have other, like oh, and also emergency planning, which is so important right now. We have samples, we have things that people can fill out where, it talks like who is the person that would take your children in the event that unfortunately you get detained. What is your plan? Do you have money set aside? Do you own a business? Like, keep in mind all these things that sometimes people don't think about. And then, sometimes you think it's not going to happen to me. But, you keep hearing these stories, right, where it's not just happening to, the people that they say is, are the most dangerous and what have you, but it's happening to citizens. It's happening to, students who, just express a difference of opinion. It's happening to so many vulnerable people. So it's really important to be prepared.
And can you share again where people can find those lists?
Oh, sure. It's cliniclegal.org. So go there, go to our website, check out what we have there. We have a ton of really great information. I'm proud of all the good things that we put together. We have so many. We basically are, we're all experts in our field because we do the training and we're helping others train, be able to actually, put these things together, put the immigration relief together. And then we also do all these trainings and also advocacy. And we do advocacy at the federal level, not legislative, but we do administrative. So, there are a lot of conversations there. And when a process is too slow or when something's happening or if the fee is unreasonable, like these are things that we can also, try to push for and try to, get changed. So, we're definitely very involved and want to keep being involved and helping however we can.
That's fantastic. One of the things that happens a lot around immigrant policy is there are a lot of myths, misinformation, and disinformation. We have just 2.5 minutes left, so not a lot of time left. But what myths would you want to bust the most?
Well, I will start by saying, the fact is that immigrants, and I know you already said this, but immigrants contribute a ton, to our economy. So they are bringing in so much money. And we've already seen the negative effects. Like it's happened before, like years gone by, with Arizona, with Georgia, and now Florida, where they pass something that's anti-immigrant at the state level. And then you see the economic impact that then normally it makes people to then backpedal a little bit. We haven't seen that in Florida yet, but we have seen, after SB 1718, which was this terrible bill, we saw people leaving the state. And, we had videos of construction workers basically showing here, I'm on site, I'm the foreman, and there's like one other worker. And there were, photos of fields, videos of fields where, the fruit was rotting on the vine because it wasn't getting picked. And so this is something that is really important that people understand that immigrants are so crucial to our economy. They pay taxes. Yes, they pay taxes even if they are undocumented. You can get an ITIN number from, the IRS, and then you basically file that way. And so they're paying billions of dollars into this system. They are incredibly hardworking. I know we hear about, the criminals. Of course, there are criminals in any group. Honestly, though, when you look at the numbers, and these are the real numbers and not, just handpicked for certain things that make it look better and fit the narrative that the other side wants to portray. But you could tell that immigrants are committing crimes at a less, smaller rate because they're trying to stay under the radar because they want to be able to become citizens. They don't want to lose their immigration relief. Like that's the last thing they want. So, and I'm someone who worked with survivors of gender-based violence for many, many years. So it really irritates me that there's only this one side that is portrayed. And there's like the vast majority are just amazing people who are part of their communities, who live there, work there, raise their children there, go to school, and call these places home.
That is so important. I'm so thankful that you busted the myths and that you're sharing the resources. And we have like 10 seconds. What are the resource URL again?
cliniclegal.org.
cliniclegal.org, you all. Go there, get the resources. Thank you so much for being on, and thanks for all that you do.
Oh, thank you so much. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. Don't go away. Next up, we're talking about immigrant rights, a topic everyone needs more information on. We have you. Stick with us. We'll be back in a moment. Welcome back to Breaking Through with me, Kristen Rao Finkbeiner, powered by Moms Rising. We have a spectacular, amazing, wonderful, wonderful, wonderful guest with us right now, Erica Gallegos with the Childcare for Every Family Network. Welcome, Erica.
Hi, thanks for having me.
I'm so glad you're here. Childcare for Every Family Network. Every family needs childcare. Sometimes some people try to pretend that every family does not need access to childcare. To those, I say, what planet are you living on? You are so out of touch. So right now, we have a situation where 3/4 of moms are in the labor force. Families need the money that comes in from working to put food on the table, to put a roof over the heads from moms. But in order to be able to go to work, we need safe, enriching places for our kids to be so that they can thrive. And we also need fair pay for childcare workers so they can stay in the profession. And might I just add that many childcare workers, in fact, possibly most, are also moms. We're all in this disaster together where parents can't afford to pay any more for childcare because childcare costs more than college in most states, and we definitely can't pay childcare workers any less because childcare workers are some of the lowest paid workers in America. Disaster. In this disaster, we have Donald Trump and Republicans in Congress bizarrely trying to undercut, take out, eviscerate, and really just stab the heart of childcare. So what is happening right now, Erica, with childcare? I mean, it is just inexplicable attack by Republicans in Congress and Donald Trump because childcare actually fuels our economy and, educates our youngest learners.
Yes, so as many of you know, in the dead of night last night, a reconciliation bill was passed, and it's going to not only it's going to slash Medicaid access, and it's going to affect SNAP benefits. And the reality for childcare specifically is that it's not going to do anything in favor of childcare. And you said it, right? Right now, parents, in order to work, parents and families need access to childcare to work, but also to take care of themselves, to take care of their own mental health, to be active in their communities. And so at the Childcare for Every Family Network, we really do want childcare for every family. We don't believe that it should be tied to work. We don't believe that it should be tied to parents paying co-pays, because the reality is that childcare for every family, having space that is safe, that is close to home or close to work, that is available at all hours of the day, including weekends, right? Because not everyone works the quote unquote traditional hours of a 9-to-5 job, that it's truly accessible for everyone to have the care that they need. And the other reality is that with the huge push for mass deportation, that's also going to affect childcare. So the immigrant workforce, particularly women who are immigrants, make up 8% of the overall US workforce, but they make up more like 20% of the childcare workforce. So this is going to directly impact access for families. And at the Childcare for Every Family Network, we also recently hosted a Know Your Rights webinar for families that are having to deal with ICE, as well as childcare providers that fear ICE showing up to their childcare centers or their homes where they're caring for children.
There is so much disinformation, misinformation, weird information, wrong information, disastrous information, hateful information being spread, frankly, largely by MAGA Republicans. People are like, why are they spreading that? Well, there's a couple of reasons. One is that cognitively speaking, information that is hateful or makes you feel fear is twice as sticky in your memory as something that's love or joy. And so we have a situation where what I call it hate spaghetti, where we have Republicans, particularly MAGA Republicans, throwing weird, wacky, awful, hateful ideas at the wall time after time to see what sticks, and then doubling down on what is most sticky in people's minds, regardless of if it's true or not. It is so upsetting. And so I want to just ask a question right now. If you wanted to talk about any myths that you want to bust, what would they be right now? Because, we need to bust these myths.
Yeah. Well, as I was saying earlier, childcare being tied to work, right? The reason that we want to ensure that childcare access is not tied to work is so that families have the care that they need so that their families can thrive. Care for their children, but also for themselves. It's a huge mental health issue as well. Having access to childcare so that you can care for your own mental health is really important for families. And I would say, as a solo parent myself with a 5-year-old, having access to childcare allows me to go grocery shopping, allows me to participate, to volunteer in my community, right? When otherwise it would be much more difficult to be able to do so. So having free, accessible childcare is more than just a work product, right?
It's so important. I love that you raised that. Oh, you have another one. I can tell. What's the other myth? What are you ready to bust?
Before I was at the Childcare for Every Family Network, I was on the ground in New Mexico talking directly with childcare providers and parents that had issues trying to access childcare for their children or trying to increase wages for themselves. And one of the things that I would hear time and time again from the people that we were organizing with was, I thought that I made bad choices as a parent or as a childcare provider, right? Like I didn't graduate high school, or I didn't go to college, or I did these things to put myself in this position where I make low wages or whatever the case is, right? And it was really great to go through this organizing model for power and change with them, because that they would say to me, I realized that I wasn't broken, the system is broken, and I'm here to change that, right? So as parents and providers, society often tells parents and providers, that there's this myth of the welfare queen, that you're taking advantage of a system. But the reality is that system is broken, and we need to completely reimagine that system so that it truly works for and with our families and our providers.
I 100% agree with you. And that's why people sharing their stories is so important. Your story that you could share with the media, you could share your story with Congress or any elected official, and importantly with each other. Because once you see what's happening, it's really, 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 really obvious that when this many people are having the same, very similar types of struggles at the same time, we don't have an epidemic of personal failures, as it is often blamed on moms for the disastrous lack of a care infrastructure. Instead, we have national and state structural issues that we can and must solve together. So I love that you raised that. Now, you talked about some moments of hope. What are those moments of hope? I could hear them in what you were just saying a minute ago. What's bringing you hope?
Well, there's definitely a lot to stress us out in this moment, right? And to attempt to slash that hope. But when I work with my colleagues at the Childcare for Every Family Network and others across the country, that are fighting together for a universal free childcare system. The main thing that brings me hope is when I'm talking with childcare providers and parents that are trying to truly reimagine a system and think about how we might build a system together that actually works for our families and our communities. Um, and it just brings me so much hope to be able to reimagine a system with them, because there's just so many great ideas about how we might increase access in childcare deserts, or we might increase wages, and ensure that our workforce doesn't get gentrified in the process, right? So there's so many pieces and nuggets of hope in those spaces, talking with folks and thinking about reimagining a system.
I love that you're reimagining the system in partnership with parents and providers, because one of the things that super annoys me is that too often people try to pit parents against providers, which is the most ridiculous, awful, very bad thing, because many parents are the providers. Like my own mom became a childcare worker when I was little because she needed both the wages and wanted to hang out in the same building as me, right? So that is not uncommon for parents and providers to be one and the same. So having the shared co-visioning of how to build a better reality is so important. What are some of the ideas that we should all be thinking about? I'm like, ready, let's go. I'm so annoyed that right now we're having to fight to protect the barely workable patchwork childcare system that we have. We're having to fight to protect that. I love visioning a better tomorrow. So what are some ideas that you love that we should be thinking about?
Well, we're really thinking about our childcare system being funded fully, just like other essential infrastructure. So thinking about it being funded just like we do roads and schools and libraries, that it's a public good and that it is funded the way that it really needs to be. And then we're also thinking about how we make sure lawmakers understand that, right? And understand the importance of that. And you said it, we got to share our stories. We got to take collective action together. Taking that collective action together also brings me a lot of hope and joy to see folks coming together to fight for a reimagined system. And then also thinking about paid family medical leave as part of that structure that is needed for care for our families. So thinking about the whole family, not just like you were saying, there's all these piecemeal, but we really need to think about the whole family.
Yep.
We really got to think about making sure that it's centered in the needs of parents and providers. And you know, again, if we don't center the needs and voices and leadership expertise of moms, of caregivers, then we won't get the system that we actually need. And
Yes, I love
so,
that.
you know, we really got to make sure that they are at the forefront, that they're in leadership, in making sure that whatever we imagine is actually going to benefit them.
Yeah, work for us for sure. I mean, the amount of times that there have been unintended negative consequences because the people who are most directly impacted are left out is too many to list. So I totally agree with you. How can people, we have like 20 seconds left. How can people get involved with childcare for every family?
Well, go to our website, childcareforeveryfamilynetwork.org. And, you know, we have an action center. We have a resource list. We just put together a resource list for families and providers that are affected by the issues right now, the immigration issues right now. So there's a whole long list of resources there. You can sign up for our newsletter where we share what the latest news on what's going on with childcare, not only at the federal level, but at the state level as well. And there's also a library of videos there. You can go and watch our video on Know Your Rights for those that are interacting with ICE right now. So go to our website, you can sign up and also find lots of resources.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. Thank you so much for being on. Thanks for all you do. Everybody get involved and stay involved with childcare for every family. Thank you. Well, that's it for our show today. Thanks so much for tuning in as we cover the top topics facing our nation in a way that requires the most boring disclaimer in the history of the planet Earth. Here goes. Views expressed on this show are those of the individual speakers and should not be attributed to Moms Rising, to this station, or to any news or social media service that may disseminate a recording of this show to the public or to any segment of the public. Boom! We'll catch you next week.